Episode 009, Artsy Marxist. Have you ever thought about leaving the United States? These days, I know I have. It's interesting to me, in the US, there's this attitude that leaving the country is something solely for rich retirees. In reality, there's tons of opportunities out there where poor and working people can seek out a better life abroad. Artsy Marxist is one of those people. They, along with their partner, left the United States for Mexico, and they share their story. It's not easy, and it's not free, but it can be done, and you don't need to be rich to do it. The way I see it, that's a truth they don't want you to know. Artsy Marxist is an incredible artist and activist who teaches art and live streams art sessions on YouTube and Twitch. We talk politics, what led Artsy Marxist to communism, the concept of revolution, religion, and of course, art. Please welcome to the show, Artsy Marxist. So, how are you? Thanks for joining me.
Well, I'm doing great. Yeah, and thank you for making this happen. This is awesome. Just been doing a lot of painting as I usually do. I stream both on Fridays and Sundays, just live art and lo-fi. I figure we all kind of need a break from the craziness of everyday life under capitalism. So I try to just create a space where people can come and relax and chat and whatnot. And that takes up most of my time. So yeah, it's the most I've painted at any point in my life, but I've been loving it. So
let's start early. We're gonna talk about basically everything you mentioned, but I want to start, very basic and probably at the beginning. What got you into art, and how did you know? And this is coming from a person who I cannot draw a stick figure to save my life. I have no like artistic talent in that regard. You have a superpower as far as I'm concerned. And so I'm just so intrigued. Like, when did you realize, like, some of it is just natural talent, right?
I guess I don't know. I would say so. My family is all sorts of different artists. We've got like psychologists, musicians. I don't know how much of it has to do with that versus the fact that since we're all artists in some form or fashion, we just have the materials for it somehow. Like my grandpa and grandma were both artists, and that led to my mother being a professional artist, So we have paint supplies available to us at like 2 years old. So, but it's definitely some combo between that and then just constant practice. I used it as a form of like self-medication for paying attention all throughout school, in spite of getting in trouble for it frequently, and teachers taking my pencil away or my notebook away so I couldn't draw. But you do anything for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 15 years, and eventually it starts to pay off. So, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, I could totally be wrong. I'm just speculating. But the way I see it, something like let's say you want to get good at an instrument, and maybe you really have very little natural music talent, like you just don't have great rhythm or anything like that. I think with enough practice, you will get really great at that instrument. I think when it comes to something like drawing or painting, there has to be a little bit of just a natural ability. And if you don't have it at all, you can practice a lot and you will get better. You will become decent, but I think you will only get so good. And I think that like there has to just be a little bit of something natural there. I could totally be wrong. I can't prove that. I think it's impossible to prove. But I do think with that there's like a sixth eye you need to have or something, or a third eye rather.
Yeah, I mean, I've taught art for about 3 years, and I would personally disagree with that, but only because I think when most people think of art, what they're thinking of is like being a portrait artist or like doing still lifes. And that's not the only type of art there is. What I tend to find is like people try to force themselves down that lane, and then they're like, well, why am I not good at this? Well, I mean, that's not the only type of art. There's impressionism, there's contemporary art, there's surrealism. I mean, the types of art are endless, as endless as there are people, basically. Every person has their own take on how they create. So what I would encourage for somebody that is interested in art, but like feeling like they're quote unquote not good at it, is expand the types of art you're trying. Don't just stick with watercolors and then like never try acrylics or oils, because you might find that something just clicks for you with those mediums that doesn't with a different type. So I found that of all of my students I taught to teach or to paint or to do art, every single one of them was incredibly talented. It was just like matching them with the type of art. And usually if somebody thought they quote unquote weren't good at art, their style was impressionistic or contemporary. So
that's very wonderful and inspirational what you just said. However, I bet if I became your student, you would change your answer. I think you would just be like, you know what? Some people just aren't meant to do this. Ron, I'm sorry. Do other stuff.
Challenge accepted. I bet I could find the artist.
I would love that, actually. That would be really cool. Because man, it'd be a really big uphill climb, I'm telling you. And I love art. I appreciate it a bunch. I studied it, not studied as an artist, but studied like art history some in Florence and stuff. So I appreciate it very much. But man, I cannot do anything to save my life. I cannot I can't like draw a straight line. I mean, even like with a ruler, I still mess it up. I
have a chronic tremor. And I still figure it out. So I'm sure you can.
You have a gift. I mean, I've watched some of your streams, like you and your pieces. I hope to one day, become a patron and as in have one of your things in a frame. That's what is patronage, right? Like that's what. Yeah. All right. So some of your videos, I've watched some of your videos. How do you do like the fast motion stuff where it's like do you just like speed up a video, or how does that happen exactly?
Oh, I noticed, on YouTube, like when I do a so I use DaVinci Resolve, and you're able to, they have a free version of the program that's quite extensive, and you're able to speed up sections of the video, and it turns out really nice. So that's how you do that. If you end up getting that program, I could find a link or a walkthrough so that you could see how to do it.
No, I thought it was neat. I figured it was like some kind of effect or something. So you just were sort of born into art and just always kind of did it. And so when you say students, what did you teach? Well, I mean, you taught art, but like what level and,
Yeah. So I did basically art seminars or like crash courses or whatever you want to call it at this community art center in Wisconsin. And they were 3-hour long sessions that, were meant to kind of either introduce people to art or expand their knowledge of it. And they were available to people of all ages. I mean, we could choose what ages we wanted to teach, but I felt that, really any age is fine. It's kind of the same whether you're 6 or 80. And I did have that range of students, and it was super fun. I very much enjoyed that and did it for 2.5 years. And then when I was living in China, I also taught a English immersion art class to 6 to 12-year-olds. And so that was 3 years already.
That is so cool. So let's get into politics. You are the Artsy Marxist, and what got you into politics initially? And then we'll slowly go down the radicalization hole. But what kind of got you interested initially? And where did you start initially, like on the spectrum?
Yeah, well, that's a tough question because it kind of depends on how far back you want to go. But
as far back as you want.
I'm gonna say
I want the beginning, but you can start where you want.
Yeah, I mean, it's been I've always been the sort that pushed back against authority in terms of like what the status quo was that I was being taught. I knew for a fact that when I was being told by my teachers that I wasn't allowed to draw to pay attention, that there was something wrong, and I resisted them. And that's part of why I am who I am today, but it was not easy. I had teachers literally bring me to tears multiple times as just like a kid this high because I was trying to cope with being on the spectrum and having no treatment for that and trying to get through school. So I was raised in a conservative home, a very conservative home.
Really?
Yeah, my
But
parents.
everybody was artists?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
I
I wouldn't have guessed that, but I guess all right, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that they were like they're farmers, you know. My
Okay.
grandparents were Norwegian immigrants who came over because they couldn't find any work. My grandpa was a minister and an artist, and he couldn't find any work and had many children to support. So they came to the United States looking for opportunities, and they did find some here. But these were all very rural locations where he was living. My grandparents were living in like rural Minnesota, rural Montana, South Dakota. So, not a lot of exposure to different types of people. And then the other side of my family also lived in a very rural location. So, it's just a bit different. And I was raised both in that sphere because I was taken to the farm every single weekend, pretty much, or every other weekend. So I was exposed to that and farming and that sort of community. But then I grew up in the city, so I had these two experiences to like compare and contrast. And I think that definitely affected sort of my thinking. I was like, why is there such a difference between what my parents are saying and my experiences? And I had to really question that. And that first took the form of me questioning the strict form of Christianity that my parents were teaching to me. I was the first one in my family, to my knowledge, to refuse to be confirmed.
What branch of Christianity was it?
Let me see here. My mom's side is all Lutheran, but very, very strict Lutheranism. And then the other side is Catholic. But my dad did convert to Lutheranism when he met my mom. So, yeah.
So that, in some ways, those are like kind of opposite a little bit.
In some ways, but there's
because Luther, like Martin Luther, was all, hey, I don't think the Pope is infallible. And they were like, no, he is. And then Martin Luther's like, well, here's the thing I wrote that says that that's not the case. And here's some other stuff I'm pissed off about. And they were like, no, unacceptable. And so he went off and did his own thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. So I don't really, they seemed very similar to me in a lot of ways, though, in terms of like the form of Lutheranism. I know that there's more like liberal, or I don't even know what you would call it, like less strict forms of Lutheranism.
Right.
It seems like in my family, because my grandpa was a minister, I mean, it was very strict, and a lot of the same sort of rules centering around conservatism and, limiting the rights of women and things like that still applied.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They're going to marry each other there. Yeah, no, that's true. It's just interesting in like one family, like that's a divide, because that was like a really big, like he branched off. I mean, I was raised Catholic, so some of this stuff is still floating around in my long-term memory, as much as I've tried to forget all of the dogma, but it's like, it's still kind of floating around there. But yeah, so you didn't, so you didn't get confirmed?
No, I didn't. I got a hold of what the church that I went to called the Devil's Books, and they were just like books that kind of brought up contradictions in the Bible. And then I read through the entire Bible at like 12 or 13 and started asking people at church about it, because I was like just literally looking to understand the religion that I was part of. And when I was met with sort of disciplinary action and threats to be limited from going to church camp and stuff like that, I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why wouldn't, like, I'm not even looking to like follow anything about Satan or anything like that. Like, I'm just literally trying to understand why, if God is, the Almighty, why he would contradict himself in his own book. That doesn't make sense,
Mm-hmm.
And so their response was to just like push me farther and farther away, which only made me question more. And once I had opened Pandora's box in terms of religion, that started making me question the other conservative beliefs that I was being taught that were clearly connected to religion. And 15 years later, I was a communist. So,
Well, I mean, I had a similar experience. I sometimes wonder, because I went to Catholic school, and so as the years went by, I mean, we would have to go to religion class and things like that. And
Yeah.
as the years went by, like I started having more and more questions just about all of it. And the answers just sounded more and more absurd to the point where you would kind of look at these I would look at my teachers and I would be like, this is frightening that you're a grown adult and you're peddling this bullshit. And I think by the time I was in like 10th grade, I don't think I was like a full-fledged like I think I was one of those people where I was just like, I think there's a supreme being out there because it's been shoved, like drilled into my head so hard. I'm not ready to go there yet, but I'm against organized religion. Like I think it's a bad idea. That was where I was at by like, 13 or whatever. And then by like college, I was like, look, there's probably not a God out there. And if there is some supreme being, it's certainly not any of this man-made stuff. It's just not a thing. So, which by definition is either an atheist or an agnostic, depending on how people want to define their terms. But so I don't get too caught up in those weeds. People can call me what they want, but it's one of those. It's in that family.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very similar trajectory for me. I mean, I guess I would refer to myself as an agnostic atheist because Gnostic simply means know or don't know. And I mean, humans are pretty limited right now in what we can know, but from all available evidence, I don't see any evidence that there is any sort of supreme being. So I would also refer to myself as an atheist.
It depends on how people, because some people define it. I mean, by the literal definition, I mean, from what you just said and from what I just said, we are both atheists by the literal definition, because it just means atheist without a God, which is both of us. But some people define atheism as, you believe it. And I don't really believe it or not believe it. I'm just like, I don't think there's a God. There's no evidence of a God existing. I certainly don't believe in any of the man-made gods. So, but maybe there is something beyond us out there, which I think like veers into the agnostic, area. But I think there also is, I guess if I'm being totally self-reflective, I do take a little bit of comfort in the belief that none of those man-made gods exist.
Oh, agreed. Absolutely.
So I guess maybe that makes me an atheist. I don't know.
Depends on how you define it, like you said. Yeah, the only plausible suggestion for a sort of quote-unquote God that would make sense to me is the theories proposed by Spinoza, and that's that everything and nothing is God. And like, I mean, I could see that being true. I don't see a lot of evidence for that. It seems more like playing with semantics to me. But, if there is a plausible definition in which I could see the term of God making sense, then I think I still have to define myself as agnostic atheist. But, I don't know. All I know is that we have the scientific method. And if you can't repeat results via experiments and observation and whatnot, you can't depend on it being real. So, like I think I definitely identify as much with the atheist side as the agnostic side. If that makes any sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I really do think like words are important, and the way we dissect this stuff actually really does matter. That's why when people make comments like, I don't believe in climate change, it boils my blood for many reasons. One, because, look around. And two, because you don't get to believe or not believe in it. It's science. Belief is not required here. That's what makes it science. It's based on exploration. It's based on trial and error. It's based on, you can reject it should you choose to. You can say the data is bad or whatever else, but you can't not believe in it. That belief doesn't play into the arena here. That's not how it works. That's just not how it works. No, you could believe, but there are certain things that I do think kind of blur the lines a little bit. Something like karma, for instance. Like, I think to an extent there's something to be said that, like, we know cause and effect is a thing. And I do think I am a believer, I guess you could say, that you kind of get back what you put out into the world. If you put out a lot of negativity into the world, it finds you. If you try to do good, usually good to an extent finds you. It's not a foolproof thing, obviously, but I do think that's a real thing. And even though there's not like, it's not like that's scientifically proven, but it kind of, I don't know, it's a little blurred. I think that's a little bit blurred. Like just karma is like a little blurry, because cause and effect is something that we have scientifically proven. So,
yeah. I mean, if you go around treating everybody horribly, then a lot of people are going to not like you and not really have a lot of incentive to treat you well. So right. I think that pretty much explains, I agree with you that a lot of times bad things happen to bad people. And, and I think that's explainable simply because they've gone around treating everyone like shit, No,
I feel you.
Yeah. It's never, if somebody's treating like, day-to-day people like shit, they're also treating family like shit. And, people aren't going to want to hang around. So bad things happen to those people and they get left alone, which is good.
So what got you into Marx? When did you find your way to Marx?
Well, man, that's a good question. I guess the first introduction I had to Marx was in college. I was homeless and like couch surfing. And
where'd you go?
I was in Texas. It was actually I went to school in Texas for a bit, and I had gone back home.
Where was home at the time?
Minnesota.
So how'd you wind up in Texas?
I wanted to experience warmer weather, and also I was wanting to learn Chinese. I had learned like five other languages at that point, most of which I've forgotten by now. But I was wanting to learn Chinese because I was fascinated with Chinese culture and Chinese characters. And this random school in Texas had a really solid Chinese program. So I was home for like maybe a month to a month and a half over the summer. And it got so bad at home that I decided to get out as early as possible, even though the dorms weren't even open yet at my school. And so a friendly comrade allowed me to stay at their place, and they showed me the Communist Manifesto. And at that point, I had only heard I didn't know who Marx was. I didn't know who Lenin was, nothing. I'd only heard that these are like really evil and you're even evil for reading their material. So I was like kind of scared when this comrade showed me the Communist Manifesto, but they read it aloud to me and I identified with several of the themes in it. So I was like, that's kind of food for thought. I'll need to come back to this later. And then I don't think I returned to Marx for another 5 or 6 years until after I had lived in China and tried to make sense of how different society is there in terms of like people care about each other more. The government actually does stuff to improve people's lives. There's technological advancements there, and it doesn't displace workers on the same scale that it does here, or in the United States. And I was trying to make sense of that. And then I learned that it was governed by the CPC, the Chinese Communist Party. And, I wanted to learn more about this system that made the society work so well. When I was there, I was only there 2 years, and I saw an entire subway line put down a major road in my city. And instead of tearing down a Catholic basilica that was in the way, they upgraded the basilica and redid it so that it was freshly remodeled. And then the subway passed right by it. So churchgoers could just get off the subway and go to this church. And I was like, in the US, they would have just plowed right through, and it would have taken 25 years.
They'd still be working on it.
Yeah, it never would have even been done. So it was just mind boggling to me to see this happen so fast. And road construction was the same way. Where I'm from in Minnesota, it's a running joke that there's construction season and then winter. Yeah, that's not how it works in China. Like, of course, there's constant construction, but like any city, but it's done fast. Like, they would come in and fix an intersection in a week and have traffic back on that road working functionally. And these are like highways, these are massive intersections. And, that was not a thing where I was from. So I wanted to make sense of this. And so I found David Harvey's walkthrough of Capital Volume 1 on YouTube, and it's free. I recommend it to anybody who's looking to understand, because I'm not an economist. I tried to read Volume Capital 1 and it was just going over my head. But David Harvey is an excellent professor, and he's the sort of guy that can like sum up a page of Marx in like a sentence and you understand. And once I understood that capitalism just didn't work mathematically and there's no way around that formula, once I understood law of capital centralization and how it accumulates, I could not deny that that was correct, and that it confirmed everything that I had ever observed in the differences between the United States and China. So that was when I finally had to say, like, okay, I'm a communist and this is true, And it's been, I've expanded my knowledge since then to reading like Lenin, Mao. I've watched Sankar's speeches, Ho Chi Minh's letters, and it's just further made sense to me the more time goes on. So.
You've also said that you're a revolutionary, and what does that mean to you? Like when you describe, like when someone says I'm a revolutionary, like what does that mean to you?
To me, that means that you're actively living your life in a way meant to, for lack of a better word, drive society towards revolution. I am an artist, and Marx, there's this beautiful quote by Marx where art materially affects the minds of the people who view it and creates changes in those people. And I've felt that and seen that myself as an artist. I mean, the mind is a material object. So of course, the input that it receives would create material change in your mind. And so I view that the art that I create as attempting to inspire and therefore change the minds of the people who see it, to push us and inspire us towards revolution, because all people deserve to be free from oppression. And, we will never have socialism and later communism unless all of us are lifted up together. So that's essential to me.
So one of the reasons I wanted to have you as a guest is, I do love your art, but also you left the U.S. somewhat recently as of the recording of this. And let me turn it over to you first. Tell everybody, as much as you want to share, what transpired there. When did you leave, and what was the anatomy on all that happening?
Okay. Let me see. So when I originally left China in 2015, it was never intended to be a long time that I was gone. I had always wanted to return, and I had hoped that would happen quickly. But turns out that the person who was watching my service dog while I was in China stole her. And so I returned to the United States and won her back in court, representing myself as my own lawyer. And that took a very long time. But I'm so glad that I did. But in that time, the U.S. managed to debt trap me, which isn't very surprising. I had managed to save some money in China because, the cost of living versus wages is pretty good for most workers there. Most people save money every month, even if they make a quote unquote lower wage. And so I'd managed to put some money away, but not enough to shield myself from the United States and the level of debt that swarms around that society. Yeah. So I was stuck in the United States the entire time. And by the time that I was like in a place where I could even consider thinking about returning to China, COVID happened. And I took COVID very seriously, of course. I mean, I have numerous health conditions, and I just knew that if I got it, that I would be disabled by it further, and I was right. So I went into full isolation. I'm still on some level of isolation 3 years later, though now able to go out into society quite a lot more because I'm here in Mexico. But I was just stuck in Arizona trying to not get COVID and trying to survive, just the paycheck to paycheck sort of lifestyle. And then I have to even think about it because it's so hard to remember. It's like, I don't know if you feel this way too. I know a lot of people that I have talked to do, but it feels like COVID was like a blur, like just like time is messed up when I try to think back about everything that happened with COVID. But what finally culminated in me leaving was I was infected with COVID by a family member due to their carelessness. I had started to look into leaving the United States and what my options would be. At the time, China was still heavily limiting immigration by Americans. So I wasn't going to have access to the sort of visa I would need. So I was like, well, what's my next choice? And I had lived in Mexico for a couple of months in high school. And that same friend that I lived with in high school contacted me, and they're living in the city that I live in now. And they were like, I think you'd really like it here. People mask, doctors take COVID very seriously. Everything is open to the outdoors, so you'll be safer. You should really look into coming here. And so I was considering that. At the same time that I got infected with COVID by this family member. And as I knew would happen, COVID completely disabled both myself and my partner. I developed severe vertigo to a point where I could not walk. I couldn't drive. It was awful. I felt like I was going to fall just like getting up out of my chair at any time. So it was very traumatizing because every time that I would look around, I was reminded of the day that I had been infected and all the trauma surrounding that because it was ongoing, right? And it didn't stop until January of this year. So I had this vertigo for over a year. And
but you're doing better now?
Yeah, I'm doing better.
Yes. That's good. Yeah.
I'm so thankful that the world doesn't spin when I'm just looking around. I mean, it made it hard to paint. Which is the thing I love the most. And then my partner developed a pulmonary embolism, and we couldn't seek medical care in the United States because we couldn't afford it. So the only way that we managed to finally see a doctor is we walked across the border with Arizona and Nogales, Mexico. And we saw a doctor there who just gave us basic antivirals and antibiotics. There's like 4 different meds that we were given. And that is when we started to see an improvement because prior to that, we couldn't even get out of bed. It was hard to even cook for ourselves, it was really bad. And I had known that would happen. And my entire family has denied that it was as serious as it was. And I haven't spoken to that family member since this happened. But there's been a lot of gaslighting and blaming around the disability and the fallout that resulted from this. And of course, I couldn't work. I was a trilingual interpreter at the time, translating both Mandarin Chinese and Spanish. And I lost my job because I couldn't interpret with that level of vertigo. And we had very little savings, if any. So I knew I've been homeless before more than once. And I knew that if we didn't act quickly, we were going to end up back on the streets. And I wasn't going to be able to live with myself because I had Bear, who was my first service dog, the one that I won back in court. And she was getting elderly, and I just knew she wouldn't be okay, like living out of a car or something. She was like 10 years old and starting to develop issues with her paw and walking. And so I made a quick decision with my partner that we had to leave the United States. We pulled whatever small amount of money we had out of our 401ks and used that money to get out. But as we were leaving, everything went wrong. Literally everything. They removed mask mandates from airlines. So obviously I couldn't fly on an airline that didn't mandate masks because we weren't even better from our first COVID infection, let alone risking being reinfected. And so we had to cancel our airline tickets and find a way to fly out of Mexico, which was still mandating masks on airlines. So, and they won't let you take a rental car over state lines unless you return it to the same location where you got it from. Right. And so we had to rent a U-Haul, which was very expensive, and drive it one way, all with very little money, running out of time, to get out as quickly as we possibly could, and all while being thoroughly disabled by COVID. So, I loaded up my animals. We drove in the U-Haul to, El Paso, Texas. And then we found a friend of a friend of a friend who was able to pick us up on the El Paso side and drive us over to Ciudad Juarez. And we flew out of Ciudad Juarez to Mexico City, where we completed our visa stuff. But everything went wrong the entire time we were working on this time limit and working through these serious disabilities, which, luckily we're both feeling a lot better now, but I can't say that they don't still affect us. We know that there's been changes to our daily lives as a result of long COVID, and it's hard to even remember what it felt like to be fully healthy. So to compare and contrast how we used to feel versus now, but I can definitely say there's a difference. But luckily, we're able to function day to day again. And we didn't know if that was ever going to happen because we know a lot of people that didn't get better at all. So it was quite traumatic, and our families still don't really understand why we left the United States. They don't understand the level of disability that we were facing. So we both get a lot of questions about, why don't you just come back to the US? And it's we almost died, that would be why.
I think you're definitely a lot better off where you're at.
People mask here still. All of the doctors that we've been to mask, they've got offices that are literally set up around avoiding COVID, where they're at least open to the outside, or there's only one patient allowed in the room at a time. So we're finally able to seek medical care without fear, and that's been life-changing. And again, I credit that with why we were able to even get better at all, because when we first started noticing an improvement in any way was when we were able to cross the border into Nogales to seek healthcare. And actually, we had to return 3 times because the first time that we tried to seek healthcare in Mexico, I couldn't walk to the office. I had to stop and turn around because I couldn't even make it. And it was only like a quarter of a mile from the border to this doctor's office, but I couldn't walk. So we had to drive all the way back to Tucson and then back again just to get these basic antivirals. And I don't know why U.S. doctors weren't prescribing antivirals or anything of the things that Mexican doctors were, but I can safely say there's a much lower rate of long COVID here than there is in the United States. And I can't help but think that that's connected in some way,
Wow. I mean, it's just, that is something. So you got to Mexico. So how easy was it for you? I mean, like putting aside all the stuff you just said about the trip itself, and just getting into the kind of paperwork side of it. How easy was it to just get the visa?
I mean, it was hard, but not as hard as other ways I've had to get visas before. Basically this time we had enough that we could find a Mexican immigration lawyer, and they take care of a lot of the sort of paperwork for you. And so I would definitely recommend that route to anybody that's trying to come, to Mexico or to another country. If you can afford it, an immigration lawyer will save you a lot of time and work. But that also doesn't mean it was easy because we were working with very limited amounts of money, and it did cost us about $1,000 each for each visa, which to us was quite a lot of money. And then when we actually had the immigration meeting, we had to do so in Mexico City. So we flew from Ciudad Juarez to Mexico City and stayed there for 5 days. And again, everything went wrong. Our hotel denied us in El Paso. So and they were like, yeah, you have to check in before like 3 a.m. or something. And we're like, well, we would have really appreciated knowing that because we haven't slept in a day. And now we have no place we can even lay down for a couple hours before our flight leaves. And then our flight kept getting delayed and it kept getting later and later. And we had to be at this immigration meeting in the next morning. So we were like wondering if we were going to miss our immigration meeting, which would have been a serious problem. But luckily we got there in the nick of time. We had to be there at 5 a.m. and stand in line for about 8 hours just outside until we could go into the government building and get this whole thing done. So I think we ended up not sleeping for 3 days throughout this whole process. And we were like having to explain to the Mexican government officials like why we look so tired. But everybody was so friendly and like helpful, you know. Once we got to Mexico City, we really felt safer because we were like, wow, we're really out now. You know, we can't get stuck in the US anymore. And that was really where we started to feel like we had some energy to get this done. And after that, it's been pretty good. They have you renew once a year. And then there was some sort of law that was just passed where now it's changed from 1 year to 3 years. So we should only have to renew one more time. And I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's pretty easy. Because when I lived in China, I had to do border crossings every 3 months to keep my visa. And that's a lot of work. So I'm glad I haven't had to do any border crossings for this. And it's been pretty straightforward. So.
And then after, I mean, I know some places they have like, eventually you just become a permanent resident and then you might be able to apply for citizenship or something like that. Is that the case in Mexico or?
Yeah, I'm a temporary resident. And then after 4 years, you can become a permanent resident. And then after I think about 1.5 years, you can apply for citizenship. So that's something that we're seriously looking at because the U.S. it's one of only 2 countries on earth that taxes U.S. citizens that do not live in the United States.
Right.
So you're supposed to like extensively report all of your income and stuff, which I have no idea how I would hire somebody to do that. So, you know, definitely looking at no longer being a U.S. citizen if it ever becomes a possibility for me, because it's quite expensive. They double tax you. So at like
they double tax you, but then it also costs money to renounce. Like you have to pay. I mean, I think it's like a couple $1,000s too. Like you have to pay.
It's like $10,000 to renounce.
Is it that much?
Yeah, they keep raising it.
Gee, yeah, because people are leaving.
Yeah, there are so many American refugees here working in factories and working in call centers. You would not believe it. There's a lot of people that have fled and directly identify as refugees, just like we do. So
it's incredible. I mean, and it's like, you know, they say land of the free. And I'm always like, yeah, try to leave. If it's so free, try to leave. Tell me how free it is.
Yep.
Because, you know, I mean, I was and I still am during the lockdown portion of the pandemic, you know, I was kind of looking around at society and I thought, okay, we're either going to take a turn in a way better direction, like we're either going to learn from this and take a turn in a better direction, or this is going to be the beginning of the worst. I think it's the latter. I think it's safe to say at this point, it is the latter. And, you know, I started looking around and I'm like, I don't know how much longer I can justify living here. For me personally, I mean, I had an opportunity to leave when I was in my 20s. I didn't. And the only reason I didn't was because I really wanted to do stand-up. And, you know, being in an industry that is very United States centric has kept me here. If I was in a different line, like if I was in a different field, I probably would have been gone in my 20s and I guarantee I would have never came back. But, you know, like being in a line of work that is very United States centric has kept me here. And now it's like, okay, it's more global now than it ever has been. I don't necessarily need to live here. And I'm looking around and I'm thinking, yeah, I feel like I would have, I just don't know and I'm not going to get on a soapbox right now, especially since I know I'd be preaching to the choir anyway, but like, I don't know how much longer I would want to live here unless something drastically changes, which I don't see happening. And so, I was looking into different exit plans and stuff like that, and I still am. And so I was really inspired by you. You just got out. You're just like, we're out.
Yeah.
And I know it wasn't easy. I'm not implying that at all. It wasn't easy, but you just made a plan and acted on it immediately.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really have much of a choice. It was that or homelessness. And I had always wanted to leave again anyways, because once you live in another country for an extended period of time, like even with just basic public transit or healthcare or the ability to walk somewhere, it's really hard to adjust back to the United States where you need a car for everything. I mean, during that time that I was in Arizona and unable to drive, I was completely dependent on my partner to go anywhere. Like I couldn't go to the store, the park, nothing without my partner. Whereas here, I can walk to everything I need in under a half mile, and everybody else can too. There's salons, multiple restaurants, hardware store, computer store, dentist, like literally anything you need is very close, unless you want to go to a special concert in the center of the city or something, So I just always found that really hard to adjust to in the United States. And in China, I didn't have a car the entire time I was there, and I loved that. I really don't feel safe in a car. I've seen a lot of really nasty accidents, like anybody who's driven in the United States has, and I was keenly aware that a car is basically a tin can, and if you get hit, chances are you're going to have chronic back pain for the rest of your life at the very least, if not something much worse. And so I didn't like that. I would really rather be on a bus or a train or a subway, or at the very least, a taxi where you have an experienced professional driver who knows these streets super well. It makes no sense to be driving around yourself if you can avoid it. So I found it super limiting to have to drive everywhere and find parking everywhere, and that whole sit in traffic for extended periods of time when I know very well that there's an alternative. Right. And so I've been really enjoying that about Mexico. I love being able to walk everywhere.
No, I feel you. I mean, whenever I go anywhere, and I've said this, whenever I leave the country, and the longest I've ever, I studied abroad one summer semester in Italy. So I basically spent 6 weeks in Italy. And I had a hard, I came back and I'm like, why do we live the way we live here? Why do we do this? And I feel that I have never been anywhere. And granted, I've never went to, I have not been to a third world country or anything like that, but I've never gone anywhere where I've been there and I thought, oh, I wish this place was more like the United States. It's always, why isn't the United States more like this place? Every single time, everywhere I've ever been. And look, I don't think utopia is out there. In fact, I know it isn't, but man, there's better qualities of life out there than the U.S. Way freaking better.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think that every day. No place is perfect. Anytime you move to a new country, just understand that there are things about that country you're not going to like. There are challenges you're going to face. It's just you're selecting which challenges you want to face. So to me, the fact that I have consistent healthcare that I can afford, even if I were to lose all of my money somehow, there are free public health clinics I can go to seek the medical care that I need instead of just worrying about dying. The fact that I can walk everywhere. Also, the culture here where people are just very kind to each other. We had an issue with our landlord where we thought we were going to have to move very short notice because landlords are terrible everywhere. And we were able to ask strangers basically that we'd met once or twice for help, and they did everything they could to help us, which is completely different than my experience in the United States, where you don't even know who to ask, let alone could hope that these people would reach out and help. So I think all of those things are very much worth it. There's no hustle culture here. It's completely island time. So everybody shows up late, and honestly, I much prefer that to hustle culture. The trade-off is, if you need something fixed today, too bad. Your schedule is not more important than your mechanics who may have something else come up, right? Like, but I think that makes sense. And then we have like electrical outages every once in a while, but honestly, I don't think it's very significantly different than what we were experiencing in Arizona. So like, those are the only two trade-offs that come to mind. Beyond that, everything seems great, at least where I'm at. So, you know, I think it's been a big trade-off. But, you know, I don't want to like paint the picture that it's all fun and games. I definitely miss the family members that I did still speak to in the United States. It's very difficult to go back and see them. You get homesick, and the only way to get back home in the United States is by an airplane, because there's no trains or anything like that. No, you know, real bus system. Yeah. So that's very dangerous, especially since there's nobody masking in the U.S. So it's very hard to get back and visit people. But you know what? The day-to-day quality of life improvement is so significant. It doesn't even compare. Not at all. You know, I mean, I was worried for my life in the U.S. on a regular basis between police, being a trans person, and then COVID. And I have never felt that fear here. It took my partner and I a couple of months to stop worrying all the time, to be honest, and to see red and blue police lights and realize they're not going to harass us, you know? So it took a while to like acclimate to not worrying constantly. But now that we're over that sort of hump, I feel much better, you know?
Where can people go to learn more about you? Like, where can they see your art, and what do you want to plug here in closing?
Well, I think Twitter is the best place to follow me for sort of art updates and where to see a thread of all of my work. I always keep that pinned on my profile. So that's @_Artsy Marxist _. And then if you want to join for like a chill lo-fi stream, I do that every Friday and Sunday night, usually around 11 to 11:30 p.m. Central Time. And my Twitch is @Artsy_Marxist. So you can find me there.
All righty. Well, thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, no, thank you. This has been awesome. And I really hope it helps somebody if they're considering leaving the United States and whether or not that's right for them. I hope that this will help give them some information about that. And feel free to reach out to me if you have specific questions about how to do this. This is the second country I've moved to. And so I kind of have an idea of how this works, how the visa process works. So I could at least point you in the right direction to, get you started on that.
Hey, I might take you up on that. So
yeah, please do. Please don't navigate alone if you've never done it before. So it really helps to have a couple of people you can just ask questions to.
Cheers. That was Artsy Marxist. Be sure to check them out on Twitter and follow them on YouTube and Twitch and Twitter. Another resource I will mention, if you are looking to start a life abroad and leave the United States, a resource that I came across recently and hope to collaborate more with is an organization called Plan to Leave. They can be found at plantolive.com. What they do is they work with your needs and your budget and your situation, and they help you develop a plan to leave the United States and start a life abroad. So whether you are getting ready to retire or whether your life is just beginning and you want to start a new chapter, they can help you form a plan that meets your needs and works with your budget. And right now, they're offering a free consultation. So really, you got nothing to lose. If it's something you're curious about, you want to look more into it, you got nothing to lose. Go to plantolive.com and book a free consultation today. Music for the 1000 podcast is provided by Andrew Saxena. Be sure to check out his podcast, the Bay Watching Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. I said podcast a lot in this sentence. And leave us a 5-star review, would you? Also, if you want to support this show on the sustainability end, you can do so over at patreon.com/romplacone. For Give What You Can level, you get all kinds of cool perks. I'll make you a theme song, and we're doing a 1000 bonus podcast where Andrew and myself talk about the episodes of the month. We just did our first behind the scenes podcast. We're going to be doing more. So again, that's patreon.com/romplacone. All right. We are almost in double digits. We are almost at the 10th episode. So we only got, well over 900 more. We're making a dent, slow but sure. See y'all next week. Hey guys, Ron Placone here. Take your own 1,000 challenge. No, you don't need to interview 1,000 people, although if you want to do that, go for it. Your 1,000 challenge can be whatever you want. Maybe you want to call a friend out of the blue once a week. Maybe you want to read a book every month. Maybe you want to start a different garden every season. I guess that might be dependent on where you live. Look, the point of the challenge is taking on an endeavor that enriches your life in some way, and it can be measured. And then, of course, you do it regularly. That's what 1,000 is doing for me, and hopefully for you too. The main reason for this podcast and every podcast I've ever done is to build community. So take your own challenge. Then join our Facebook group. It's called 1,000 What's Your Challenge? ? That's 1,000 What's Your Challenge ? And post about what your 1,000 challenge is and the progress you're making. All I ask is that people be encouraging of each other's challenges. This is personal and vulnerable, so be cool. There's enough negativity on social media. We don't need to add to it. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, hopefully in the future we'll be expanding to places like Discord, Reddit, but for now, we're starting on Facebook. And again, that Facebook group is called 1,000 What's Your Challenge? See you there.